Afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? It's been a long time since I've done this, so. No? Sorry, hearing aids, glasses, hair. How's that? Better? Okay. So, so on. I didn't hear what you said. Has the mystery been solved? Excellent, let's go home. So it's so lovely to be here with all of you, with old friends and new friends. And I love Rohatsu Shishin. It's just so quiet. Remember at the farm, how quiet and how intense Rohatsu was. And the circumstances of my life right now are such that I cannot be here for most of Rohatsu. But the practice I've done over many Rohatsus and the training I've received have been a great source of the practice that I'm doing outside of the Zendo, which is difficult and joyful too. I can actually even see the joy in it, and that is a testament to this training. So thank you for keeping the beating heart of Shishin going. Thank you all for your practice. So Rohatsu, the 8th day of the last month, where we celebrate or we commemorate the Buddha's enlightenment, Shakyamuni Buddha's awakening, and also the potential for our own awakening. Awakening is such a human experience. And of course, we're all already awake. We're just doing the process of realizing that. And I think that's probably why if I went to any one of you in the Zendo and said, have you ever had a taste of what we talk about in awakening? Every one of you could probably relate an experience to me where you felt that sense of oneness and connection, because it's a fundamentally human thing. It's nothing exotic or foreign or anything that we really have to make ourselves do. We pretty much just allow ourselves to do it. When I was thinking about the talk, one experience in childhood came to me when I was a school kid and I was walking through this, one of the last undeveloped areas in North suburban Dublin, where I grew up in. And it was like a warm day by Irish standards. And it had been raining. It's pretty much always raining. And there was this stand of pines. If you've ever seen a stand of pines, like perfectly aligned, old pines, they were probably planted to break the wind or whatever. And so there were these pines like reaching up into the sky. And then, you know, the way when the air is watery, and the clouds are diffuse, and the sunlight comes through them in shafts, these shafts of sunlight coming down. And that moisture in the air, you could just see it hanging there. And suddenly, all of everything fell away. This profound sense of connection, of oneness. And you hear about these experiences all the time. And I believe people. They're not unusual. And even in the memory of telling you that, the dream within a dream, I can feel this felt sense of it in my body. Like after what, 50, 60 years, I can still feel that sense in my body. It's cellular, it's in the marrow of your bones, as Bodhidharma would say. And of course, we wrap lots of words around this. And, words aren't bad. They get a bad rap in Zen, but words are always insufficient, but words are it too. And an expression is always called for, which was one of the most shocking things that I discovered in Zen was, what, we're meant to talk about this? I was, of the old-fashioned school, the noble sounds, you don't talk about those things. Probably because they would cart you off somewhere and you'd never be seen again in the society I grew up in. But yeah, we do have to make an expression. There's that Mary Oliver instructions for living. Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. Tell about it. And the impetus for a Buddha is always to express it. So I'm sure you can all express some version of this experience, whether in the beauty of nature, in music, in art, whatever your particular karma lies. Maybe in relationship, the eyes of your child, whatever it happens to be. And of course, just expressed throughout the texts. If we look at the first Zen transmission, the mythical story of the flower sermon, where the Buddha is standing up in front of this huge congregation, this huge sangha of monks in the thousands, and he holds up a flower and he twirls the flower. And one monk, Mahakayashapa, smiles, the first mind-to-mind transmission. And I'm sure Mahakayashapa broke form. I'm sure he would have been thrown out of the Zendo. He didn't stay in the form he should have, but he just fell into that moment of non-duality, which is pretty much what we do. We're not going out there seeking them, because if we are, good luck. But we do fall into them. It's as natural as sneezing, as Roshi always says. But of course, we can't live there, can we? We can't sustain that. And yet they do give us the taste of coming home. I think Kensei spoke of that yesterday, this sense of coming home. As long as we don't solidify them, objectify them, I am one with subject, object. Again, the kiss of death to those experiences. But it does speak to the longing in the heart, that bodhicitta, that longing for awakening. And it also speaks to an embodied understanding. We always experience these insights in our body. It's not an intellectual process. You can't think your way into this. It's always embodied. And we see it in all the traditions and outside of the traditions. Meister Eckhart in the Christian tradition, the eye through which I see God is the eye through which God sees me. Rumi, what you are seeking is seeking you. Suzuki Roshi talks about the heart's innermost request. And we do not need an explanation of what any of those people are talking about, right? Just by virtue of being human, we know what they're talking about. So what do we do with these insights? We have these moments of non-dual embodiment, not me, not mine, but arising for me. So totally impersonal. We're just lining up with reality. But it's our karma meeting reality. It's our karma meeting the void. So it's totally impersonal and it's totally intimate. You can feel it in every cell of your body. And I sought the answers to those questions for decades in spirituality, in religion, in art, in philosophy, anywhere where I could find a taste of it. And you know it when you taste it, right? But I had no guidance. I didn't know how to contextualize this experience, which was actually very painful. Being a seeker is a wonderful thing. And if you have teachers, it's an amazing thing, right? And then, probably like, I must have been almost 50, I discovered meditation. And suddenly I had found a path. And initially it was like falling into openness. It was such a relief to get out of my own head, to stop trying to figure this out. And you hear that a lot here when people come here first about the relief they feel. Roshio often talks about, you're out there in the samsaric world and you're so tight, your fist is so tight, the nails are actually digging into the palm of your hand. And then you actually sit and there's that little bit of unclenching. The nails are out of your hand. It's such a relief. And we have so many people who, for the first 3 or 4 months, come here and they are all about meditation. I'm never going to leave. I'm always going to do this because the relief is so profound. But your fist still isn't open, right? You actually have to do the hard work of practice and training to open that fist. Because, of course, when you sit, it is beautiful in the beginning. You're just one with the breath. My goodness. And then, of course, when the stillness of the pond falls upon us, you look into the water and you see all the crap on the bottom, right? All of the things we do not want to encounter, which can't possibly be part of this beautiful spiritual path. I don't want to see that. And we lose people there. They just don't want to go there. And, was it Jung who said the only way around is through? And in Zen, that's absolutely true. But fortunately here, we have a container of practice, a safe space where you can actually work through that. You don't have to be ashamed. Actually, that is not on the agenda at all. It is not on the menu at all. You just have to actually encounter it fully and honestly with authenticity. So we embark on practice, and for us, Shokin, training with the teacher. And the invitation is then to unclench the fist fully. And not to force that, just to let it go at its own pace, which it will, regardless. I think Kensei also spoke about always being on the edge of discomfort and knowing you're doing the thing. And I that is my experience also, that you're always like on the edge of the cliff and you're ready to step off, maybe. And sometimes the teacher will give you a helpful little push, as you've probably all experienced. But it is hard work. We're stepping off into the unknown, into groundlessness. But honestly, everything is groundless, whether you acknowledge it or not. Just like, as Roshi always says, gravity is real. You don't have to believe in it, but you're going to fall. So might as well align yourself with the way things actually are. So we open to the discomfort. We work through the difficulties, the hindrances, the kleshas, the intense emotions, and we realize that they are not separate. They actually are the path. There is no part of ourselves we are sanitizing or cutting out. We are working with the shadow side as much as with anything else. In fact, probably most of our work is there, not denying any aspect of ourselves. And of course, to do this work, at least in my experience, you need teachers. You need someone to guide you on this path because it is intense and it's easy to go off the rails on either side. And the teachers are constantly this way, no, this way, no, this way. And I found that so necessary in my practice. So Zen and teachers and awakening. First, I just like to let go of any idea of the specialness of Zen. People have been having awakening experience for millennia. all of the great wisdom traditions, outside of the great wisdom traditions. It's not peculiar to us. And even the Buddha didn't operate in a vacuum, right? He chose rebirth in the most contemplatively advanced society on the planet ever, at least in this world system up until now, where there were at least there's evidence of the Vedic traditions, the oral Vedic traditions going back 1,500 years, archaeological artifacts of people in meditation posture going back at least 2,000 years. And I'm talking BCE, so 1,500 BC, 2,000 BCE. So he was not operating in a vacuum. He was actually operating in this spiritual center of the world. And again, no shortage of teachers. And he availed himself of teachers, even when he found that those paths were partial. He listened to those teachers. He practiced with them. So we're taking up the grace path that humans have been taking up since humans have been human. So we're not that special, really. But what Zen does is we throw ourselves into the path of practice. Which, have you ever tried to explain what you do to civilians? I used to do that, maybe the first 2 or 3 times, and they would look at you like, you're crazy. What are you doing? So I don't anymore. I just say, I'm going to church. And that's fine. So we're invited to take up the path of practice that makes awakening more likely. The famous John Tarrant saying, I'm sure you all know it, awakening is an accident, meditation makes you more accident prone, as does all aspects of our practice and our training. It's all a setup to make you more accident prone. So sitting, samu, orioki, the formal liturgy of which orioki is part, koan work, breath work, verification, integration, all of which we do with a teacher. And of course, we're not practicing to be good monks in the Zendo, right? We're not practicing how to ring that bell perfectly, although it is beautiful when you can ring the bell perfectly, and we all do the liturgical dance together. It is beautiful, but really ringing the bell, if you're just ringing the bell, isn't really of that much use. And we are working in the realm of compassion here, where we actually want to be of use. But all these forms, I'm not belittling these forms. They are all really, as I said, setting us up to tumble into non-dual experience, into awakening. So orioki is a form I have a lot of difficulty with for many karmic reasons, which are, fortunately, I'm not going to go into. But particularly, at the end of orioki, when the offering bowl comes around, and you're only meant to put a tiny drop, like a few drops into the offering bowl, and you are meant to drink all of that gunky tea at the end. That is part of the liturgy. I always had difficulty with that until actually every time I did orioki, I was actually being set up to encounter this aversion, this aversive mind, until actually I would be out in the world and something really, I don't want to deal with that, would come up. And it was that old friend again. It was actually me sitting at the orioki table with the bowl of tea that was less than appetizing, right? And so every moment of shishin, an opportunity for training. And we do this until shishin, training, practice, infuses every aspect of our life, until the word aspect, the idea of aspect, is too coarse. It's just far more subtle than that. It infuses our entire lives. And working with teachers, who are further along the path than us, can save us from so many traps. First and foremost, probably, is that insight is not awakening. There are a lot of people who have those moments of connection and go out and start proclaiming the gospel, right? This is just a taste of it. It's a very superficial taste of it. And of course, we quickly fall back into separation if we don't have the tools to cultivate this path. I remember, like in childhood and the beauty of nature, these tastes weren't uncommon for me. But I remember when I was in my mid-teens, maybe 15 or so, and I was like in the perfect setup. I was on top of a mountain out on the west coast of Ireland, and it was beautiful, like beauty you couldn't even imagine. And I could feel the taste of coming home, and then I could feel the sense of me arising. I could actually feel the sense of me arising in my body. And of course, instantly repress that, and instantly, of course, you're not going to taste much of anything. What you resist persists. And I had no idea of how to work with that. I didn't know how to work with that until I came here and I had teachers. So we do have to have ways of contextualizing these experiences, of working with them skillfully. And I'm not minimizing the impact of these moments of insight either. They certainly give us a taste that there is something vaster than our small egoic self, which even if that is as far as we get on the path, that is really valuable. And they can give us some alleviation of our suffering for sure. And they can make us more compassionate people, better people to be around, more skillful in the world, but they are partial. They're not the whole thing. And Rinzin has often spoken of another aspect, which is that samadhi is not awakening. Again, meditation makes you more accident prone, and it is a necessary part of the path, but not sufficient, right? And honestly, when we sit and we think, oh, I'm one with the universe, just notice I am one with the universe, partial. So the path is long and difficult and really easy because really we're just eroding all the obstacles to our innate awakening. And one thing I've noticed about this is sometimes if you really put all your eggs in the meditation basket, sometimes the sense of self can come back with a vengeance and you don't know how to work with that. And when you've been drifting off in the clouds of samadhi and suddenly you're out there in the world and boom, that sense of self and a recipe for suffering, which is why we always start with compassion and equanimity. Establishing that base, that equanimous base, so we actually can cover the ground on which we stand. We can hold our seat when we feel that suffering is approaching. And also, awakening experiences can vary. I think it's Aiken Roshi who talks about a pinhole in the wall. I think that's probably what I'm talking about with these insight experiences. There's a pinhole in the wall, and then the spectrum goes all the way to the walls just dissolving, right? And we're basically opening the door until we realize there actually is no door. It's a gateless gate. So we work with our teachers, and wherever we are on the path, realize we all have great integration to do. And really, Rinzin always says, awakening isn't that hard. Getting up the mountain isn't that hard. It's coming back down where the really hard work of integration happens. And having those insight experiences and not being able to contextualize or integrate them is not only difficult, it kind of robs you of the joy of them because you're still suspicious, you still doubt yourself, you still think there's something you have to do, right? Until you meet a teacher and they say, enjoy it, enjoy it. So teachers can assure us of the complete ordinariness of the path and of awakening, and also to enjoy the fruits of this practice along the way, compassion, ease, the equanimity. And they also can rid us of the illusion that we do this alone, which was I know for me, an illusion, oh, sure, I can do this by myself. I'm human, right? And of the profound necessity of doing this together. You can't do it alone. You really have to, and you do it alone. Like, it's your awakening, but you can't do this in isolation. It's all about connection. So, we talk a lot about awakening in Zen. Is awakening really that important? So, Suzuki Roshi, it's not that awakening is unimportant, but it's not the part of Zen that needs to be stressed. That makes total sense, right? James Ford Roshi, first and foremost, Zen is about awakening. So welcome to Zen. So what's important? Is that even the relevant question? What are the relevant considerations here? So if there is only one thing that we realize, and we don't realize anything else, it's that we are profoundly awakened already. We are perfect and complete, lacking nothing, just as we are. And for me to even get a taste of that, I had to have teachers. I could never accept that without verification and integration. And I wasn't taught it. I was simply given the tools to realize that myself. And this is where the alleviation of suffering is. You are perfect and complete, lacking nothing, with your shadow side, with the whole thing, perfect and complete, lacking nothing. And honestly, some folks are just not that inclined towards non-dual embodiment experiences, and that is fine. This particular keyboard can contact the operating system in this particular way. This other keyboard does the same thing in different ways. It's no big deal. Practice is practice. Training is training. Don't judge yourself. Don't worry about it. Don't compare yourself. Just walk your own path and listen to what the teachers are telling you or showing you. Another danger, of course, is obsession with awakening. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Instead of just sneezing when you need to sneeze. It's quite really that simple. Just sneeze when you need to sneeze. Or there's, of course, the other aspect of that, just giving up. Well, I haven't tasted it. It can't be real, right? Despite the verification of millennia of human beings. I'm talking about this experience. And also the tendency, we need to know how to pace ourselves. We need to know how to push ourselves in our practice when it's skillful to do that, and the teachers, listen to what the teachers tell you on that, and how to put the brakes on. Sometimes the skillful thing to do is to put the brakes on, particularly in the realm of integration. Everything in its own season, right? We're not like the 5-year-old soccer team where we're all running after the ball all the time. Not necessary. Mary Oliver, sometimes I need only to stand wherever I am to be blessed. Sometimes I need only to stand wherever I am to be blessed, and trust it. So there are stages to the path, right? We have the Oxfording pictures out here, which is the unfolding and development of the path. And we work with those stages in the path until we realize there are no stages, right? Catherine of Siena said, all the way to heaven is heaven. Samsara is nirvana. And we don't skip any of the stages either, okay? So in the first stage, we're seeking the ox. We know something is missing, something is off, dukkha, right? In the world of samsara. But we have what Suzuki Roshi calls our innermost request, this arising of bodhicitta, this yearning for coming home, until we work through the path and we realize I was always home all the time. But we actually have to, even though that is true, we actually have to realize it. What we're looking for is here. What you seek is seeking you. Then we see the ox's footprints. We're on the path. The Dharma eye is developing, and we're working with all the form that we train in. We're working intellectually too. What is this suffering? Cognitive exploration is a good thing. And we follow the directions. This is the part where following the directions is really important. Drink the dregs of the tea and put the little drop into the offering bowl. And actually enjoy that. Actually, even now when aversion comes up really strongly and I think of that tea bowl, it's kind of joyful because it's kind of so ridiculous. It's like it's just tea. It's just this particular moment of karma arising. And then glimpsing the ox, moments of wakefulness. I think it's my favorite part of the Buddha's awakening story is he's sitting under the tree and he's vowed to sit until he comes to complete a full awakening. And he has done these years of grueling training, almost dying from starvation and intense meditation and devotion and all these aspects of the path. But what comes to him is that moment as a child, sitting on the hillside overlooking the farm, the spring plowing. And again, described in those words we hear all the time from people who have these experiences, this sense of oneness, of connection, of being the worms in the ground, of being the oxen pulling the plow. As simple as that. After all of that training, going back to that moment of being a child and actually just experiencing the taste of this. And then catching the ox, which is tricky. It's very tricky because the ox is not fighting you. The ox is perfectly fine and happy. It is you who are fighting, right? Suzuki Roshi always says, give the ox a vast meadow. Give it plenty of space. You don't actually need to fight it. But why do we do that? Why do we actually fight the realization that we are perfect and complete? It sounds crazy, right? I know some of you, probably some of the psychologists here, know Tara Brach, who teaches in the Theravadan tradition, and she talks about the trance of unworthiness, which is really the best description I've heard of samsara, this trance that I am not worthy. And of course, the other side of the coin is if I'm not worthy, none of you are worthy either. So a recipe for suffering. And it is difficult because we have to go into our own shadow side. We have to sit with the discomfort, practice supreme patience, not turn away from the discomfort, be willing to realize the groundlessness of all of it, of all that you hate and of all that you love. It's all groundless. And then tending the ox. So we're walking alongside the ox and the rope is pretty lax and we're doing fine and we're embodying our practice. Embodiment is so vital to this practice. It's not a cognitive exercise. And this is not an act of domination. It's an act of embodiment. So stop fighting, relax, feel your body. Then riding the ox, no rope. You're simply riding the ox. Relaxation, freedom, creativity, enjoy it. The ox has the spacious meadow and you are riding the ox. And here we become probably a lot more useful in the world, a lot more skillful. This work for the liberation of ourselves and all beings is really showing up in very skillful ways. And one thing you realize is this work that we do in the world, the work of compassion, is not the work of the small self, because it's always going to be partial if it's the work of the small self, right? It's the work of your true nature. It is the work of being in alignment with your true nature. So there's nothing egoic in it. One of the first things, I don't know if I should tell you this, but one of the first things you learn as a priest when you do liturgy is there can't be any ego there at all. if you try to make the ritual happen, you will freeze it. You're simply a conduit. I know Dawn giving me some training, when we do the dedication and the intentions and the priest bows down and she says, you're the acupressure point for the Sangha. So I am not actually doing anything, just simply allowing it all to flow. Then there's forgetting the ox. We're one, we're practice, and practice is our lives. It's just the complete flow with reality. There is no external goal. We actually realize we are home, that what you seek is seeking you, and you're home. Then the ox and the herder are both forgotten, so the enso, right? Dharmakaya, emptiness. We are the activity of the universe. There's a quote from Rumi, stop acting so small, you are the cosmos in ecstatic motion. Stop limiting yourself. Let go of that egoic self, which is really useful out there in the world, okay? But know how to wield it well. You are the universe in ecstatic motion. You are the activity of the cosmos. And then returning to the original place. Having forgotten ourselves, we're enlightened by the 10,000 things, as Dogen says, integration. And this is the major part of the path, right? Actually integrating it into our lives. I think Kensei touched on also, the work is endless. Buddhists practice endlessly. And it's not one and done. You are always on the edge of that cliff. And then, I did that. Entering the marketplace with helping hands. How do we respond in the world? Nothing special at all, simply responding. We see the sacredness of the world. The liturgy, of course, is sacred. The Arioki bowl is sacred. So are the deer droppings. So is the person yelling at you for no reason. It's all sacred. So there's a koan, of course there is, where a student comes to the master and he says, I'm solitary and destitute. Please help me. Anne Lamott, the writer, she says there are 3 prayers. Help me, help me, help me. Please, please, please. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I think in Zen that is also true. At least in my life, that is true. But anyway, I'm solitary and destitute. Please help me. And the master says, you've already drunk 3 glasses of the finest wine in China, and yet you haven't even moistened your lips. And all the koans are telling you this. You already have it. Long before you ask the question, you are awakened. Just realize it. Roshi talked about that cartoon that comes up every Thanksgiving. You talked about it on Sunday, where the master says to the student, oh, you finished your training, you're good to go. There's just one last test. And the next panel on the cartoon is the poor student sitting at the Thanksgiving dinner table with his relatives. The ultimate test of Zen. And there are dark and dry moments in Zen. All of the great mystics talk of the dark night of the soul. That will arise no matter where in the path you are. You will encounter that. But you have trained in equanimity, in compassion, in wisdom, in groundlessness. You have the tools to encounter this fully, even in the midst of the sorrow of it. Trust your body. Trust your body. And if we're really lucky, of course, we have teachers who can help us to do this whenever we need them, whenever we can call on them, they can call on us, and the answer is always yes. So, yeah, the impetus is stop acting so small. You are the cosmos in ecstatic motion. But just think what the alternative is if you don't embrace that. There's a line in Mary Oliver, listen, are you barely breathing and calling it a life? Are you barely breathing and calling it a life? And for decades, I was barely breathing and calling it a life. And I seemed particularly competent, and I was raising children, and my career was going fine. And I seemed like a nice enough person. They wouldn't avoid me. But I was barely breathing and calling it a life. James Ford says, become the actions of awakening. And this is what will naturally arise. You become the activity of the universe. Stop being so small. You are the cosmos in ecstatic motion. So let's take it up.